Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Justin the Food Entrepreneur Show. I'm Justin Bizzarro. I'm your host. That's Bizzarro. For anyone who's out there, you can find us on Instagram at Justin the Food Entrepreneurs or at Justin Bizzarro. You can also find our community at Gorilla Brave. You can find us on the internet as well as online, guys, on Instagram. For that by the time this podcast comes out, the website will be relaunched. If you're still seeing it in black and red, it means it's the old one. The new one is pink and blue. The colors that you'll see on our Instagram stuff for this podcast, as we do the Instagram for that, you'll see an ending at the end of every reel that shows Gorilla Brave. That's the new color scheme that we thought we needed more of an abrupt change. That way everyone could see the difference in the way the pricing's done, the networking's done, the summits are done, the events are done, the coaching's done, all the things, the educational information that you guys asked for. It's all in there for everyone that's been asking for it. So again, transcripts for every episode, summary notes, Gorilla Brave destination, community, entrepreneur to entrepreneur fellowship, everything you guys have sort of asked for. Like I said, I've listened. I really thought this podcast would go a different direction, honestly, when I started, but this is part of being an entrepreneur. You realize your audience different. Maybe your skill set's different. That's one of the things that I've had to realize on this show. And before I introduce the guest for this show, I'm going to anchor this point so we can tee it up. Is just sometimes life leads us in a different direction, and what we were doing originally isn't what we're doing now. Okay. And all the years as a food entrepreneur, did I grow humans? Yeah. Did I focus on growing humans so humans could grow the businesses? Yes, that's important. Eventually you have to stop focusing in or on your business and grow the humans. The humans will grow the business. That's important for everyone. But the other part is, as I've done this and as I've pivoted away and into other things over the last 3 years, consulting, coaching, done random jobs all over the place to learn some skills that I didn't get, like in food service. We didn't bake. We brought in things to bake in Rationale ovens or in ovens, but we did not make things from scratch to bake. We were not bakers. It's a different type of science in food. And in the volume we were talking about, we had to work with local large bakeries to customize for our healthcare clients. That's important. And the restaurants and stuff, same thing. It just wasn't our expertise. Food trucks, things like that. So we would outsource to other entrepreneurs. That's okay to do. Entrepreneur to entrepreneur relationship, entrepreneur to farmer relationship, all great. What is my point? My point is, I'm a food builder. I build companies that produce food, that make things, that make tangible things. You know, the podcast was merely supposed to be a way for me to connect with a greater audience that liked the things that I built or liked the things that other people built on the podcast. It was supposed to be for consumers. But very quickly, based on my skill and my set, I learned that, hey, I'm actually better at growing humans. It wasn't necessarily always the businesses I was growing. Yes, I put in structures, infrastructure, ideas, systems, but those systems, infrastructures, everything in the business that actually allowed the business to grow was the growing of the humans and the infrastructure to grow the humans in it, not necessarily only run the business. Okay, the companies that do really well figure out how to grow the humans and the businesses simultaneously using the systems that organize it for profitability. It's a big thing. And so here, what happened is I realized my audience was different. I realized what everyone was gaining from this podcast. It took me, thinking all the years I've been an entrepreneur, listening to people. I wasn't actually listening to what was going on here. So I have tweaked that for everyone. I've tweaked the way the podcasts are done. I tweaked the way the questions are done for the entrepreneurs. I've tweaked the way we interact with entrepreneurs afterwards. I tweaked the way I interact with you guys as an audience, since I now understand that a majority of you are food and beverage, farming, or entrepreneurs in some supporting space of food and beverage. Okay, so everyone has asked for growth. Everyone's asked for growth orientation. I know a lot of people out there are fans of the entrepreneurs on the show. So the continuation of the journey is important. Okay. Did I do one or two episodes before because I wanted to continue to tell the story? Yeah, it just happened to make sense to continue to put out episodes, to continue to tell stories. But however, what I've learned is that the most important thing I can do for everyone in the space that you're asking is continue to do that, what you're asking, because a snapshot does not give you as much relevance and help you grow as entrepreneur, to help grow your business as much as I continue to tell the story. And then that way you could see that these entrepreneurs also pivot, change. Necessarily the reason they got on here 2 years ago, or the business they started 2 years ago, isn't the same business they're in 2 years later, or in the same location, or in a trailer to a truck. So I want to focus on that as we tee up today's episode. So with that being said, I have a guest with us from Pancoast Pizza out of Walnut Creek, California. John McCormick, how are you doing today? Pancoast, just in case anyone didn't hear me, that's Pancoast Pizza in Walnut Creek, California, guys, Northern California-ish. So, John, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Justin. How are you?
Good. It's all yours. I did a lot of talking there, so it's your turn to take the mic for a little bit for me.
Yeah, I'll give you a breather here. No, that was
Yeah.
a great introduction and a great kind of jumping off point, because my background started in actually financial services, working at UBS and Northwestern Mutual. I transitioned into a small company at the time called Salesforce.com and got into tech software sales, where I spent about the last 20 years leading sales organizations, building startups, jumping from company to company and trying to see some explosive growth, until the point where the market kind of shifted a couple of years ago, both socioeconomically, but also financially and technologically, with the advent of AI. And some of the startups I was at, didn't take off. They crashed. And so not only were there a lot of learning lessons there, but it opened up a couple of new opportunities, one of which was the opportunity to get local with a business where I live in Walnut Creek and buy Pancoast Pizza, which is a small pizza shop started by Bob and Julie Pancoast. So hence Pancoast Pizza. And Pancoast Pizza services Walnut Creek, Danville, Alamo, Pleasant Hill of the 925 area code. And specifically, it's across the street, almost in the parking lot of the local high school, the Los Alamos Knights. So we have a pretty solid customer base baked into our business with the high school, and then Kaiser Permanente, which is a regional hospital here. It is right across the street as well. So one of the things that I was looking for, we kind of discussed this earlier, Justin, is, my background is more of an entrepreneur. My first job that I can remember earning dollars at was, we lived on the backside of a golf course in Novato, California. And I used to go find golf balls right on the OB line. I'd take them home, I'd clean them, I'd come back to the golf course, and I'd sell them back to the golfers after they had lost them. It was 5 for $1. And every day the marshal would come and shoo me off the course, and I'd come back 30 minutes later and I'd still sell a bunch. But it was a fun kind of introduction to what the world could be like if you're willing to put in a little elbow grease and hustle.
Yeah, and one man's trash is another man's treasure.
Correct. So I vividly remember we had a Samsonite suitcase in the garage filled with golf balls, and it wasn't like one of the small ones you could carry on. It was a big one that you had to check. And whenever we needed money, me and my friends would go in there, grab, a bunch of golf balls, clean them up, run over the hill, go sell them, and then we'd have money to go rent a movie or go to the arcade or do whatever you do in the 80s. So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, no cell phones. Our parents didn't know what we were doing. That's the craziest part. And to think about how
that's right,
we were ingenious. And I think that's part of our generation. No offense, guys, but and every generation can get greater. I do believe that. But what a crazy, weird scenario to grow up in. We can talk about that a little bit, because I think
that's a whole nother episode. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's also why there's such entrepreneurial boom and what I will call an entrepreneurial echo boom in our kids that are coming up or are just starting. If you were born in the 70s, 80s era, maybe your kids are a little bit younger still, but I would say that at the beginning of you're talking late 60s, early 70s, they're having kids, if you were born like mid 80s, where you still experience some of the 80s influence as a person to be influenced by, there is impact there. So the freedoms that were given in life, the things that were there, the what I would call era of lack of parenting, not that they were doing it on purpose, but there was a lot of freedom, letting your kid figure it out on their own, hard knocks, even teaching in school was less disciplinary. There was a trend of allowing the kids to figure it out on their own, or the hard knocks, because that's the way life is. There's a difference in schooling now and mentality there. And I want to emphasize that for the audience, that what we see in America, all the entrepreneurism, all the success in food and beverage and stuff like that, has to do with, number one, a generation of freedom. Okay. In that freedom, though, we had to earn our own way. Like chores and allowance and money was nowhere given as free as it is now to children. It was very earned, and what you got is what you got. And if you wanted more, you had to go figure it out, which was part of the entrepreneurship. If you wanted Blockbuster, if you wanted all the cool toys or the new cereals or whatever, you were going to have to participate, because guess what? We were on a budget, and anything beyond it, that was yours to figure out. We just don't 100%. Run households that way anymore. And so, and one of the reasons is because debt is so easy. We don't need to worry about having budgets as much anymore because debt is so much easier. But I want to emphasize this for anyone out there, entrepreneur. People ask me, well, how do I encourage entrepreneurship to go on in my family, in my environment, in my community? Well, we just talked about it. It wasn't that our parents didn't care totally. It was just that they gave us the freedom to make the mistakes. And they encouraged us to go do business. And by the way, the high school that your kids go to, I put literally physically myself carried these 300-pound yogurt machines. I think they were about 110 pounds actually in there, because a dolly broke. And I'll never forget it in my life. I carried 2 of them into that school right across from, and we were in the business, and the salesperson that was supposed to be out in California to go do it canceled, and I went out and did it. I'll never forget it in my life. My back hurt for months. And I was CrossFitting at the time, so it's not like I wasn't deadlifting almost, 300, 400, 500 pounds potentially at that time. I don't exactly remember, more than I do now in my older years, but I remember that school very distinctly, the nights, everything. Like I can just see it in my head, like just trying to get this thing off the back of a box truck, because I can't figure out how to put together this contraption that's supposed to make a cart, that's supposed to wheel it in the building. And I'm thinking it's broken when it's really just in pieces, because someone just needs to put it together. But anyway.
That's incredible.
Yeah. Let's go back to beginning, earning your own way, entrepreneurship, because you don't totally follow that direction, even though it's clearly part of who you are at a young age. Talk to me about direction. Is it always eating you up inside? Let's go to school, finance, into technology. Talk to me about the different leaps, why the leaps, because I think oddly, the entrepreneurship's always been there. But what I'm trying to anchor is there's a skill that's being given to you along the way to prepare you for where you are today, even giving you the financially ability to do it. I mean, that's part of it, right?
Absolutely, 100%. So, when we were growing up, we grew up in a town called Novato, California. And back in the 70s and 80s and even early 90s, it was still it was a red and blue town. So a lot of San Francisco Fire and a lot of SFPD lived in Novato, but worked in the city. And this, for those of you who don't know, San Francisco to Novato, it's about a 45-minute car ride. Novato's in the North Bay across the Golden Gate Bridge. And so when we were kids, we learned very quickly that connections and the ability to know people really had an outsized influence on what you wanted to do on the weekends. And said another way, if we ever wanted to go to a Giants or a Niners game on the weekend, all we had to do was catch the bus to Candlestick Park, find our neighbor, the cop, have him go get tickets from a scalper, and then we would just go into the game. And that was a good way, an introduction of like, hey, you got to know somebody, and there's always a way to find something to get into there, and that's something that's kind of followed me throughout my life is what I call that hustle. And, going to UC Davis, studying managerial economics was really interesting because I struggled with a lot of the core classes of an economics degree.
Yeah.
But the ones that everybody came back and like, man, that's the hardest. That was the most difficult class. That was the hardest test I ever had to take. It kind of got me going. I was like, oh, that's a challenge. Okay, I want to go to there. And I would get A pluses in these classes. And part of it was hustle. Part of it was also I found out, look, if I sign up to be the teacher's aide with that he's teaching another class, I can get to know him. I can ask him questions and I can like pick his brain and build this relationship with him. So when he sees my test come across the board, he knows, oh, hey, John knows this material. I've talked with him about it. And, it just kind of gives him that additional confidence in me as an individual. And I think one of the things that I've learned across time here in my career is the more that you can build your brand and the more that you can establish yourself as a good person who's trustworthy that people want to be around, good things will happen to you. And, I brought that into my repertoire, if you will, very early on, and trying to be nice to everybody, respect everybody. Not everybody's opinion is the same as yours. And like you were saying, look, you want to take the podcast a certain way, but your audience has said, hey, we want to hear more of this, right? And this is the content that we value. And so you want to have as many people in your sphere of influence that you say, hey, look, okay, maybe it's not just my opinion that counts. And, the best way to attract people is to be a good person, put good things out there. I've got a lot of friends that focus on that. And, that's something that's served me really well, not only from like college on, but just personal life and relationships. And especially as I've made this transition from technology to owning a food services restaurant. And so when I graduated college, I was very fortunate. My parents did a very good job of saving for college. My grandparents helped out as well. So I was able to exit college without a lot of debt. And my now wife and I moved in together at a small apartment halfway. She taught in Sacramento. I worked in San Francisco. So halfway in between us, this town called Fairfield, California, we had an apartment. And I used to wake up at about 2:30 in the morning and I'd get ready. I'd drive. I'd catch the first BART train, which is the Bay Area Rapid Transit System. I'd drive about 45 minutes to go catch that. I would be on the first train into San Francisco, where I worked as an analyst, a junior analyst intern for a financial services firm. And it was always the first train because the driver got to know me and I'd sit right next to him and I'd fall asleep on the train, but he knew where I got off and he'd knock on the window when I fell asleep and he'd be like, hey, it's your stop. It's the Embarcadero. And I get off. So again, that idea of, hey, relationships, being good, being nice, saying hi to the train driver probably saved me from being late to work at least a dozen times. Right. And those are the things that it's funny as you look back in retrospect, build up to the point you're at today. And sometimes you don't know that's what's happening when it's going on, but it's all kind of credit in this relationship bank that you're starting to build up.
Yeah, I like this. Let's talk about this a little bit more because I think the drive here to get to your job, to also have a relationship. Most people don't have the mental toughness, the discipline, the obedience to even do either one of those, right?
Right.
Why?
Yeah.
What is going on in your head right now at that time? I mean, you're trying to build a relationship. I know this feeling. You're basically working 16 hours a day because of the commute.
Correct. Yeah. And it was really interesting. I wanted to be the next Gordon Gekko. I wanted to work on Wall Street and I wanted to be the guy who was doing mergers and activities, acquiring companies, breaking them up. I grew up with the slogan "greed, for lack of a better word, is good" from the movie Wall Street. And, having that hustle of, okay, how are you going to make it from this paycheck to the next one? How are you going to build kind of your empire like Gordon Gekko did through mergers and acquisitions? And so I thought the best way to do that was going to be work on Wall Street. So for about the first 18 months of my career, I was working on Wall Street in these financial analyst type roles. And a friend called me and said, hey, look, I've got an open role. It's a temp job, but it's at a really interesting company. I think you'll want to listen to it, but they're building a sales operations the team, and I think you'd be a really good fit with your people ability, but also your acumen for financial statements and trying to recognize revenue. I was like, okay, cool. So it was at a company called Salesforce.com. And after being a temporary employee for about 4 months, they offered me the full-time role. And I stayed at Salesforce.com for a little over 6 years and did everything from working with Mark Benioff outside of his office and seeing kind of how he operates his business, and working with the CFO and being able to see how they're growing this business from pre-IPO to IPO to established organization. It was great, and it was such a proving ground and the ability to see like a real hustle. So when I was at Salesforce, I would my desk was literally outside of Benioff's office, and all the people who came to see him would parade by my desk. You'd see famous actors, you'd see senators, governors, you'd see very high profile and important people walk by, and you realize, hey, they're just people too. There's a lot of aura we put around celebrities in this world. And, the more time I spend with people who are famous, the more I realize they're just people too. And they laugh at the same jokes. They, have the same funny ideas. They like similar things. And so Benioff gave us that ability to normalize a lot of things. And I think one of the things that, as I look back on my career, I worked in, some fairly corporate jobs now, if you look at them, but at the point they were very entrepreneurial. And, for the longest time, Mark introduced himself as he's an entrepreneur. Like his LinkedIn profile said, tech entrepreneur. And he went to the USC School of Entrepreneurship. And he has that in his blood. And it was watching him build a company, which was really impactful for me. And leadership that he displayed of having clear goals was something that I carried on with me throughout my career as well, because he would start every company meeting with, hey guys, I'm really excited to be here. We are at $1 million in revenue, and our goal is to get to $12 million in revenue by the end of the year. And this is how we're going to do it. And then this is why this meeting is important to that. And as we grew, the numbers went from, we got to get to 50 million to we got to get to 100 million to we got to get to 300 million. And there's points where I was like, man, there's no way they're going to get there. And now, they're worth over billions of dollars. And it's amazing the power of leadership. And so, the entrepreneurial side of me kind of kicked in again when I moved to a company called Inside View. It's a tech startup in San Francisco. It was in South San Francisco. Again, waking up really early to drive in and commute. But it was worth it because it was so cool to be part of a real Series A, Series B company where you're very early in your funding cycle. You're still figuring out what works from a technology standpoint. And one of the things that I loved about working at an early stage startup was we call it the Wild West. It's about getting the deal done. It's not about getting the legal just right or the billing just right. It's about, hey, what does the product need to do in order to have the customer sign off on it and say like, yeah, that's what I want. And the ability to work with these companies that are trying to break the norm and do something a little different to see outsized gains was really impactful for me. And I think there's a lot of hustle and entrepreneurship that you can learn from what I deem like the real world of, you've got to wake up early to get your food truck prep. You've got to make sure you have it all stocked. You've got to make sure that you have your spot location identified. You've got to make sure you get there early to get your parking spot. You got to make sure you have all these checklists, right? And you forget at the end of the day, hey, you've got to have a bang up product too, right? And it's something where you've got to make sure you're focusing on what that customer wants. And I think the tech startup world does a really good job. Okay, hey, what does this contract need to look like in order to get the deal done? What do we need to do to make you satisfied? And it's a little inverse, right? Which I think in all my rambling here, I'm realizing that my point is that, I think in the real world where we all are working and living right now, we're focused on all the things you do before getting to making your product for your customer, because there's regulations, there's health codes, there's all those things. In the tech startup world, sometimes it's inverse. It's like, okay, get to what your customer wants first and then build the rest of it after, right? And so it's been an interesting transition as I've gone up in the ranks and just graduating from company to company, and then ending up as a what I've always felt myself as a entrepreneur and the ability to get out and hustle.
Yeah, let me ask a few anchoring questions because I think this
Yeah,
is important because I in food service and food service partners, we started in California, in Northern California. That was our first location. South San Francisco, where the first commissary was that did all the Kaiser Permanente hospitals. Northern California, out of there, that was our first contract. But because of the influence of the area, and the influence on Kaiser being in Oakland and all the technology that was going on in healthcare and also technology and healthier food, it played a big role in our company. Okay. And I also want to anchor the negotiation piece because it also anchored, even as a very large company, every contract we had, whether it's healthcare, long-term care, grocery store, Sam's Club, Walmart, consumer packaged goods, beef jerky, we customized our contracts. It was not a one fit solution to all or production to all. And we would add in pieces of equipment. I know a lot of people do this. A lot of people don't do this. They won't get out of whether they're just barbecue sauce or whatever. So a couple things here. One that lended itself. This is what's, I want to emphasize this for the audience. Getting into healthcare and all the diets and all the crazy things, and then the technology that was going on at the time, plus going through 9/11, financial crisis, COVID, all these crises in jerks and pivots, teach you a couple things. One, contracts have to be fluid, okay? They have to be able to change, adjust, be amended during the time period that you're in, okay? Another point is that I'm going to say for everyone is that food pricing can suddenly come out of nowhere. When milk prices changed, or the Obama administration decided that we needed less cows, so we lessened the amount of milk cows, which significantly raised the price of milk almost 4 times at that time when milk was less than $1 a gallon. And great, we still have to subsidize, but I just want to emphasize what that does to a business when suddenly I'm serving milk on every tray in every hospital 3 times a day across the country, doing millions of meals a day. So this is the things that we're talking about. There needs to be fluidity in things. You need to understand that the market does change. You need to come to acceptance that at some point you have to have a relationship, which we just talked about, that is strong enough with your clients, with your vendors, with your customers to have hard conversations. My price is going up. Guess what? I love you. You're my customers, but guys, I've got milk prices. And in order for me to keep giving you the service and the food and the quality you guys love, I have to adjust to what's going on in the market. That way I can keep my employees alive. And that conversation back to the CEO leadership, having the ability to set a goal, also not only set a goal, but being able to open up that conversation, then also sets the CEO or the leader of the company to have the hard conversations because they're already having the other conversations. Okay, that's important. So what is my point, everyone? Well, I zigzagged a lot there. A couple things. Fluidity in contracts. Don't get so caught up in the way things are now or the way things have been done that you're too rigid to adjust your business, okay? And even if you truly are an entrepreneurial business, you're still building it as you fly, even though it may be a stream of 1,500 jumbo jets in the air. You may still be
100%.
jumping from plane to plane, adjusting wings. You may still be building more planes with those planes. It doesn't ever land. It's just not the way running and leading a business works. And so you're being prepared for that, right? As you're going through your journey, Salesforce is preparing you for this. One of the things that I do have a question for, and we can are about, is you sort of go from this massive company where there's lots of humans down to a very local focused business. That's one of the things that I want to ask you about. I want to talk about because I know what that's like in my own life, building a very large organization and then downsizing your life to rebuild in a different way. So let's go there. Let's go to transition. You're at Salesforce. You then transition to a bunch of other things. We mentioned AI, the ups and downs. I think it's very, similar to maybe what the technology industry went through before 2000s, like the early 90s, late 90s, the ups and downs of all those crazy, weird technology companies. And when penny stocks really became penny stocks, crazy was when these upstart technology companies were coming up penny stocks also. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, well, it's important to note, like when I joined Salesforce as an official employee, I was around 600. So I was the 600th employee. And, now they have several thousand employees, and they're a multinational organization.
They're
And,
Salesforce towers in every city now, I think.
Exactly. And
like
I remember when we
Sears.
took up 2 floors in a building, that was a big deal. Then we expanded to 4. But anyways, as Salesforce grew to be bigger, I had a need to go to a smaller company, and like I needed things to get smaller because you had more autonomy to do things. There wasn't somebody standing over your shoulder saying you can't do it. You have to do it like this. You can't do it like that. And I think the transition into continuously jumping into these smaller startups and, led me to a company that actually went to its first IPO, which was Zendesk. And it was great. It was awesome because I learned a lot there about empowering your employees. And we talked about, building people in the beginning of the introduction here. If you want to build and scale a company, you have to invest in the people. And I feel like companies like Salesforce and Zendesk and WeWork did a really good job of doing that and empowering people to make decisions. And, as I look at the differences between that world and this world in which I'm living in now, a restaurant owner, it does take a certain mindset of an individual to be okay with making a decision, right? And some people have to be open to making that decision. And as long as you're building trust and transparency and you're kind of fostering that as a leader or an owner of your organization, you want those outside point of views or different ways to do things brought to you because you don't know what's going to hit, right? And this is one of the things that I learned from Mark Benioff and later Adam Newman at WeWork was, it's okay to fail, but you got to find a way to overcome no, right? You have to find a way to overcome no, I don't like that. And, I think I try to instill that in as many people as I can at the shop, right? I call Pancoast Pizza the shop. But, if people bring me something and what do you want me to do? I ask them real fast, well, what are your ideas for this? Right. And so that's the first motion in building and investing in people of saying, okay, well, what's your opinion? Let me hear it. And then we can build off that. Because me just telling you what to do doesn't help that person build that muscle, right? It just builds that motion and it's just repetitive, right? And if you can build on the person, then you don't know where else that will take them. But if you just teach them that one thing over and over and how to do it your way, you have to be open to some differences and some, outside opinions. But the journey from going from like a small to a big company, back to a small company, back to a small to a medium-sized company, and then back to a small Series A company, I keep getting pulled back into the startup world. And I like it because you have access to founders, you have access to boards, you have access to see how big companies deal with not only managing debt, taking on new funding, new rounds, bringing a product to market. What goes into bringing a tech product to market versus a hardware product versus a software versus a new menu item? What are the things that you're doing to say, hey, is this worthy of rewriting my menu, adding it to the new menus? Do I have to print off new menus? These are the things that I'm evaluating now at the shop of. I've had this establishment for almost a year and I know what works and what doesn't. We have a very loyal customer base. And, people bring ideas to me all the time for new menu items. And Mondays are the day that we'll test out new things. And we have people that will come in. And if you're a customer and you stop by, you'll probably see us messing around with some stuff and we'll ask your opinion. What do you think about this? Do you like this? Yesterday we tried to do pizza. I made 2 really large ones. We cut them up into a bunch of pieces, and whoever's in the restaurant, hey, I see you're eating a pepperoni pizza. This is a new pepperoni. Would you be interested in trying and give me your feedback? Don't worry about it. It's on us. Getting people's opinions, it's really amazing when you have a good product, and when you have an okay product that people give you mixed feedback on, that's just as valuable. And in the tech world, we have a saying, it's just as important to get to know as it is to yes, because then you can stop wasting your time on the stuff that's not moving the needle. And that's really where I try to focus a lot of my energy now at the shop is, how do I build upon what it is that I acquired and that our customers love? And what are they asking for? So those are some of the lessons from the tech software world, I think, that are very applicable to owning your own business and, kind of getting hyper local. And, when I had the opportunity to take over this, it was part about work-life balance. It was part being closer to my kids that are at the high school, in the backyard of the pizza shop, being able to grow this business within that community, which when I bought this business, the previous owner wasn't really integrated into the high school, the local high school there, despite being in the parking lot. And he would sell pizza here or there. But really, when I came in, I sat down with the principal. I sat down with 3 of the advisors that are at the school. And I said, what do you need from us as like a good community partner? And they offered up a couple of things. One was a campus beautification program. One was the ability to donate to the sports booster program, and in a new way that they were like looking to see if there was a market validation for that. So I helped them develop that program as well. And then establishing like standardized pricing that, if you come in and you want to raise funds for the school, I'm going to give you a deeper discount on that pizza that you buy from me, because that's raising funds for your school. And that's something that I really want to help foster. And I want to be the go-to partner for you guys with that. If this is for a school program, I'm going to give you a good discount, but it's not going to be the same as if you were raising funds for the school. And talking with them about that mentality of, hey, I want this to be the high school's go-to spot, has really thrown in a new level of revenue for the organization, because now we're the default provider for all events at Las Lomas High School, which is great. We do a lot of business with them, and we love the back and forth. And I make it a point to hire high school students as well, not only because they're decent workers and they're cheaper than a lot of the people that are out there with a lot more experience, but it gives me the chance to help them start to ask the questions that will help them build a better career. So in order for a high school student to come to me, even if they're my best friend's kid, there are rules. There are rules that they have to come in. They have to interview for the job with the shop manager. They have to ask for the job. They have to talk to me as well and explain why they want this job. It's not just my dad said go there and start working right away because he knows Mr. McCormick. It's, you have to demonstrate a little bit about why you want this. And so I'm trying to bring back kind of that hustle and the drive that we saw in the 70s and 80s of the kids that are growing up then, of the independence. You got to instill that in these people today as they're growing up, because I feel like that is one thing that this generation, I'm looking at my son's generation and my daughter's generation, they have to learn that. And it's something that it's not as readily accessible, I think, as it was when we were young.
Yeah, I'm going to anchor this because this is an important thing.
I'm bird walking, sorry.
No, you're good. I want to let you talk, and we have time. It's your show and it's about your business, and we can always do a part 2, as we said at the beginning of the show. I love those. I love continuing to tell the story and be educated myself and not feel alone as an entrepreneur about all the ups and downs I pivot through. Honestly, that's part 2 and part 3 were just as much about me. I didn't realize the educational value until later, but what it was serving for me, for the audience, just so you're aware of that. I'm going to anchor this for everyone. One of the things I did this season, and I'll call it a season, even though we don't label them that way, is this season started basically December 25th of 2024. If anyone goes back, you'll see that around August of 2023, I take a leave of absence, and we sort of dot out episodes, but it's definitely almost a year. Well, technically it's 14 months gone where I didn't record anything. Okay. And when I came back to the show and decided to do it again, and a lot of people, this is what it is, and I could start hearing what everyone wanted in the show, which we talked about at the beginning. One of the things I did instead of just trying to hunt down entrepreneurs to be on the show the whole time, like just hunt. That's what I was doing constantly. Social media, email, whatever, hunt. Anyone. What I did this time as I got started was something I went to everyone I knew or I had built a relationship with and asked them to give me a recommendations of someone they knew in food and beverage. Now, not everyone knew a food and beverage entrepreneur. It certainly made them think, which I didn't intend to, about how connected they were to their local community and their local businesses when I asked the question. Which, so getting that feedback from some of them that didn't know anyone was interesting. But the majority of the individuals that have come on the show recently are recommendations from other individuals that I, then look up on Instagram or then do the email. It's less of pursuing and blindly pursuing. Like there's a lot of, and even though I don't get responses back still, there's a difference in the caliber of the relationships and what I have to go through at the beginning of a podcast, or I will say this, the amount of no shows I deal with to get individuals on the show is like 1/3 of what it used to be. And it wasn't a lot before, but still that's a significant drop if you think about percentage. So why am I saying this? John has a reputation of being involved in his community. He's involved in the school. He cares about the benefit of everything else. How can the business serve its community? Okay. This is something that tech individuals, entrepreneurs get. Tech, biotech, newer industries, maybe it's solar panels now, whatever the thing is in the newer industries. One of the things that happens when you both have to build a business and build an industry at the same time is there's a different mentality around the industry and the team members that come up in it. Food's old. It's been around forever, as long as we've been alive, or any animal's been alive for that matter, or a creature, or even tree, because they have food. They get their nutrients. So the thing being is when you're building something and you're a business and building something in a business, you have to build the industry also. What does that mean? That means I have to think about just as much about my own profit as about does the industry have the capacity so I can even get to $100 million company? Because not only am I building a $100 million company, but I'm building an industry to handle a $100 million company. Yeah. That's the thing that I want to emphasize on this. And one of the things that is important about this episode and why this is a little bit different. Do we see it in other entrepreneurs? Yes, on this show. Have there been others? Are they in pizza or a similar product? Yes. Why? Well, they know that there's established industry, established business, but there's a lot of room for improvement. Okay. That's why financial savvy individuals, you see them, a lot of them anchor in pizza. Why is that important? Because pizza has good margins. Pizza has good business. Pizza has a way of being involved in the community. Are there other businesses that check those marks? Sure. Can you create a blue ocean strategy? Yes, I recommend that too. But I'm just allowing everyone to understand what's going on here. Okay. And from the standpoint of pizza is still an industry being built, because there wouldn't be as many entries and as many businesses in pizza if it wasn't still a growing industry. I think the Pizza Expo in Las Vegas is the biggest food conference in the world. And if it's not anymore, it was at one time. I think maybe Dubai probably has something bigger now in food. But just saying. So, John, I just want to talk more about the community. I want to talk about your menu as well. But first, let's anchor those on how we get to them with, you bought someone else's business. It's their traditions, it's their cultures, it's their core values. Let's talk about coming into an existing business. Because you're now, not only have you learned leadership, but something you're having to do is transformative leadership in this case. Yeah. Let's talk about that.
Absolutely. So before, just real quick, if anybody's going to Pizza Expo in Vegas, give me a shout, find me on LinkedIn. Happy to connect and talk in person. I'll be there. It'll be a good time. it'll be my first one, but everybody I talk to says it's one of the best events of the year. On the topic of kind of ingraining yourself in the community, that's something I think I took with me from growing up in Nevada, which again was a very small town in the North Bay, a lot of police and firemen. So it was a very safe community. But building that community is something that I've always been a part of. When I was at Salesforce, Mark Benioff had he's a phenomenal leader on so many fronts, but he had a model that he called at the time 1-1-1. He later added another one, but it was 1% of company earnings, 1% of company time, and 1% of company stock gets donated to local charities. And as an employee at Salesforce, you had to volunteer X amount of hours per month and per year, no matter your role. So you could be at Glide Food Kitchen serving with Mark Benioff to the homeless people, serving food. And it was really impactful for me to see that, because the successful organizations that I've seen grow always have an element of that, giving back to the community or building a community around them. And so when I had the opportunity to do that here at Pancoast, for me, that was part of my business model. And I wasn't looking to buy a restaurant. It just so happened that that was the business that was presented to me. And I had an inside track to have that conversation with the owner. For me, when I made the decision to follow the idea, I want to go buy a business, and it had certain markers. It had to have certain markers, and it had to achieve certain milestones and have certain attributes. It wasn't, I had to go buy a restaurant. It wasn't, I had to go buy an HVAC business, or I had to go buy a clerical firm. It was, I needed these metrics. And when I sat down and I talked to the former owner, this checked 4 out of 5, for example, check marks. And it was an established brand, dependable revenue stream, good margins, an underactivated customer base that I could then go leverage all of my years of sales and marketing from tech software to go activate. And would I have fun doing it? Right. And of those 5, this hit all 5. And it was amazing to sit down and write your business plan for the first time. And, as I go back and I look at it, how am I achieving against it? First part was be an active part of the community, connect with the people over at Kaiser Permanente, offer a frontlines worker discount of, a lunch special that you get only if you work there. The second thing we did, we put together a student special, $5 for a slice and a soda for the kids walking out of class. And believe me when I say, in order to walk off the campus, you have to walk past the pizza shop. And that was one thing that was really quick and easy to do, and make that student base feel special. And then the third thing was get in touch with the organization that drives funds for the local schools. Here it's called Walnut Creek Education Fund, and they're always raising funds to buy the schools new computers, books, additional resources that they need to give our kids the best education that they can. And so I wanted to align myself with all 3 of those communities right away. So those are the 3 areas I focused on. Later, I went into local swim teams are a really big thing here, as our soccer clubs. So offering them, a specialized experience at Pancoast Pizza where, hey, you have a swim meet at the pool on Wednesday night, pre-order, we'll give you a discount and we'll deliver it out to you. Or the one that's really popular is, look, order at full price, we'll deliver it to you, and we'll give a percentage of your order, your ticket, to that pool so they can do pool maintenance funds or put together a party at the end of the year, or whatever their general fund is trying to save for. But the ability to do that, because that ties you emotionally to your customer base. There's so many people that come into the restaurant and they're like, I love your pizza, but I love the vibe here more. Right. And people are excited to be there. They're happy to be there. And taking over a brand from somebody else is a very difficult thing, in my opinion. We're still called Pancoast Pizza. It's an established brand. It's part of one of the reasons why I wanted to buy it. And Bob and Julie did a great job of creating a fantastic menu and establishing a good business. They got tired at the end, right? And that's what happens to a lot of business owners, especially in the restaurant industry, is to grind. They both work there. They both spent all their time and effort there, and that will burn you out pretty quickly. And it's really tough. And they were putting kids through school. And they got to a point where they say, hey, look, we want to go try a different avenue and we're ready to start a different gear in our lives. And I was there at that right point in time. And one of my commitments to Bob when I bought the business was, hey, man, I'm not going to change much because it's really working. What I am going to go do is go work on the sales and marketing side where I can expand and open new revenue streams and like activate that customer base probably a little bit more because I know how. And he's like, yeah, totally. I get it because I'm an old chef who's never really used social media besides just scrolling to find funny cat videos. And it's like, yeah, no problem. So one of the things that we did that was really interesting is there was the funny thing about owning a local pizza joint is you find that there's a lot of former employees that worked there in high school or worked there as they were in the summer in college, and they go out and they get real jobs and they come back with these different skill sets. So I had a couple of former employees come in to me and they said, hey, listen, I used to work here. I do a lot of social media work now, and I'm a freelance social media marketing person. Would you be interested in working with me? And I said, absolutely. So I empowered her to go build our social media brand, which took us from 500 followers on Instagram to a little under a year later, we're almost at 3,000. And we did that through bringing in influencers and having them post videos, and we give them store credits, let them try the food for free. And they post to their 5 or 10,000 users that are local, and people get excited. And then we run a lot of promotions through our Instagram channel too, and our social media ads as well. So that's a really interesting way is if you have an established restaurant or business and that's been there for years, look at your previous employee base. There's probably a lot of good people with skill sets that have gone on to do other things that might be able to come back and help you do something new and help refresh or just give you a boost of energy because you're doing something new. And the other thing, we hired a woman who was a previous employee. She's now a local artist. She came in and she did all of our chalkboard menus by hand, and they look great and they're awesome. And it's kind of a throwback to the old school blackboard menu, but it stays up there and it's awesome and it looks great. And she did an amazing job, and I was so happy to support her as she's building her business. So again, that idea of community and being a service-based leader where you're helping those around you. The old saying is rising tide lifts all boats. Like, let's all benefit with this together. So those are some of the things I think that are really pertinent as you're transitioning and even looking at your business today of, hey, how do I grow revenue or how do I access a new user base? There's a lot of ways. And for me, I didn't know anything about Instagram or marketing on Instagram, but I knew that Lana did. And Lana she can go activate this user base, and she's been doing an amazing job with it. And so we're doing all sorts of fun things now. And it's been a journey for sure with that.
I love it. I'm just processing here. There's so much here. I'm going to talk about this. The employees, the way employees are treated, hiring, firing. Obviously, you coming into a small business, it's a smaller business environment, human resource wise, but you learned a lot in the tech world because the tech world experimented with human resources more than anyone I've ever known, at least ever since there's been such a thing. I don't think there's ever been decades where human resources or employee satisfaction or happiness or efficiency or effectiveness have been studied more and played with more. Talk to me a little bit about that. How does that translate into what you're doing now?
Yeah, I mean, it's the biggest jump I've had from tech world to this world is the people and managing the people, because I went from managing people with MBAs, large aspirations. I was managing big teams, people way smarter than me. And it's really amazing to go from that world where you're having complex financial conversations and you're talking about deals of $50 million, $60 million. And, look at today, and I'm working with people. Some might not have graduated high school. Some probably are under the influence of something that's very legal in California. Some are high school students and they just don't know what to ask. Yeah. Right. And so it's a different level of interacting with people, and it's not good. It's not better. It's not worse. It's different. Right. And working with people, you have to have patience. You have to have clarity. You have to have confidence. But again, it is all about managing expectations. And I kept all the staff that wanted to stay during the transition that Bob Pancoast had hired. And everybody had a job. Everybody's first thing was, oh, are you going to lay off staff? No, we're not. If you want to leave, you can leave. If you don't like this new management style, that's fine. It's not for everybody. But we do expect you to work. We do expect you to work hard, and we do expect you to manage results. And for me, one of the things I had to get used to is somebody just didn't show up for their shift. I mean, in the world where I spent the last 25 years, that just doesn't happen. You don't not show up.
No
right?
kidding, right?
And it's interesting having to deal with that and work with that and talk with somebody about, like, well, why did this happen? What's going on? We had a situation. In fact, last week we had hired one of the kids of a friend. I golf with him every once in a while. And he said, hey, my son needs a job for a couple of months. Would you mind talking to him? I gave him the spiel. Yeah, he's got to come in. He's got to talk to us. He's got to ask for the job, all that stuff. He did. He had previous experience. But then, Friday night, he was on shift. He rolls around and he didn't show up. He didn't text. We texted him. I texted him. My shift leader texted him. I finally had to text his dad and say, hey, man, like, where's your son? He hasn't shown up and he's supposed to be on shift. And about half an hour later, he's texting. He said, oh my God, I'm on my way. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. And the way that I handled it was like, look, the store manager who I trust to run the day-to-day operations, it's his call. If he wants to keep him on, he can keep him on. If he's like, look, I need people who I can depend on. I can't have you around anymore. Then I let him have it. And that's what he did. He said, hey, I need people who are dependable. I need people who are going to show up on time and work hard. And you've demonstrated that that's not you. And, sorry, but it's hard sometimes. And it's hard to decouple the emotional aspect of people leadership with the interaction of I like you, but you're just not producing.
Yeah, but you get to steer them to be the MBA person at this point. That's where you are in life. Like, if you give them the lesson now, it's hard. It sucks firing someone, but it's better at the pizza joint than at a $600,000 job where they've never had failure. Or maybe it's a $30,000 job at a pizza place that they never leave because someone kept enabling the bad behavior. Whatever it is, both are equally as bad. I know money doesn't matter at that point when the world falls out from under you because you've been enabled in some way your whole life or someone hasn't given you reality. It's hard. I've seen it, especially as a person that delivers it to someone that's older, that we then have to let them go because, finally you pay the piper for your sin at some point. That's just the way it is, or whatever you want to say. And so, like, the thing that growing humans and really is, and why I say this to you, John, is because if we don't learn that lesson and we don't gain that skill, that's so necessary. I feel like the ability to fail, the ability to have someone to say to us, hey, you're not cutting it, you should be doing better. So we do better, or have a ginormous failure. I mean,
think about this industry for a second, Justin.
Yeah.
So you get to the top of this industry by being the best chef, by cooking the best, or like having the best menu, or operating the most efficient restaurant. A lot of times, most of the times, that's not people management related, right? It's skill related. And so people management is a skill that you have to hone, you have to work on, work on your kids. That's the first and easiest way to do that, right? You work on it with people. And the more I interact with people, the more I find these things to be true. Is one, people enjoy clarity and honesty, right? If they're messing up, they want to know what they're messing up and how they can make it better. And they want to get better. Inherently, I believe people want to get better all the time. And I feel like the more that you can be transparent and honest and confident with them as you do that and you convey that, the more not only do they perform, but the more they trust you. And the more trust that's there, you mentioned difficult conversations with customers or with people. The most difficult conversations are with employees and the people that staff your workplace. And being able to have hard conversations with people, but be very clear and transparent and matter of fact, it's really hard to remove emotion from these conversations, especially when you spend a large portion of your day in a tight quartered space with them. And so being able to build that layer of trust into all these things of, hey, look, we both have the same goal. We want this restaurant to perform really well. And in order for us to achieve that, here's my vision of how we do this. What's yours, and where do we align, and how do we do this? That's a great interview question as you're looking to bring on new staff, right? I'm in an interesting place right now in that two of the employees that I took over were long tenured employees. One had been there for 8 years. The other had been there for 12 years. And the one that I was there for 8 years had a lot more experience running restaurants. And I made her my general manager. She's the exact opposite of me in so many aspects, in that just different lifestyles, different life choices. And we didn't see eye to eye all the time. But what we did see eye to eye on was we wanted the restaurant to do really well. And when I took over the restaurant, I made sure to retain her and promote her because she ran a lot of the things in that restaurant, and it helped ease that transition point of all that tribal knowledge that I didn't know that was out there of what is our prep schedule? What is our ordering frequency of these items? How do we do this? How do we do that? She took over, and because she had been doing it for a while, and she knew it, and that was invaluable as I figured out some of the things like what is our average demand on a monthly basis? What's our average Friday look like? What does our staffing need to be? And I had to build the data to make that decision over the course of 6 to 8 months because the previous owner didn't have all of that. And so it was, okay, cool. I wanted to make sure that I had all the data, the quantitative information to make a decision if I was going to make any changes. And the funny thing is
back to
as we built
economics, right?
Exactly. And as I look at this business, you mentioned pizza business changing and growing and have great margins. That's all true. But the way people eat pizza has changed. And what's changed is DoorDash and Grubhub and these delivery services and Uber Eats. And, 70% of our business, almost 80% of our business the last 6 months has been takeaway, either by DoorDash, Grubhub, order online and pick up, but no one eats in the restaurant anymore. And it's probably a function of we have a very small space. I think we have 10 tables. We can seat 40 people at most. It's a function of people don't eat pizza in a restaurant. They don't go out for the pizza experience unless it's like a really high brand, high elevated experience. But if you're Friday night and you're watching movies, you want your pizza at home with your buddies or your family, your kids, and you want to have a couple slices and some options, and you want to watch that movie at home. You don't want to go to a loud restaurant. And so that's impacting how I look at the business going forward. And how do I maximize that part of the business? Because the more I talk to other restaurant owners, the more I hear the same thing. Is like, especially in the pizza business, oh, it's all delivery. It's not dine-in anymore. And if we have time for just a really funny story, when I first took over the restaurant, my wife and I were really excited. We said, hey, let's go to New York City. Our pizza is a thin crust New York style pizza. Bob Pancoast was from Philadelphia, Jersey area, so he had it really down. But let's go see what the new pizza places are that are out there. So my wife and I went to New York City, and over the course of 6 days, we went to, I think, 25 pizzerias. We had 25, 30 different slices of pizza. We kept a Google Doc with notes about like crust and sauce and cheese ratio and like all these things. And every time I walked into a restaurant, a pizza shop, and the owner was there, I would ask them questions, and they'd say like, okay, yeah, this is what it is. And like, I'd tell them, I give them context. Hey, I just bought a pizza place in California, and we do New York style pizza, and we're here doing this. And it was not a competitive situation. It was more of a communal feel of, oh my God, you own a pizza place too? Do you want to check out the back? Do you want to talk to our chefs who make the recipes? Like, hey, this is what we're doing. What are you guys seeing? Like, and part of it was so new to me. I couldn't answer a lot of their questions, but they loved some of the ideas that we were having around like social media marketing and some of the influencers and all the stuff. And, we came back from that trip with this amazing feel of, hey, pizza's pizza. And there's a great guy. He does Scott's Pizza Tours in New York City. If you're ever there, check him out. And on Sundays, he drives a bus around and he'll take you to all these different places, but he does a really good job of explaining and building a story around pizza. And one of the things that he said that really resonated was, whatever pizza you ate growing up, that's the pizza that you prefer throughout your life, right? And there's so many different types of pizza. There's thin crust, there's thick crust, there's, you can mess around with the fermentation levels, the hydration levels, the fermentation time, and you can get so many different results. And one of the guys who opened up one of what I felt was one of the best pizzas in New York City, which is Lindustry, Massimo, he said, hey, look, he's a soccer player and he'd only been in the pizza business for a couple of years, but he took a chemist's approach to making his crust. He got very like into what makes a good crust. And so talking to him at that level of like, hey, is there sourdough in there? Is that like, what's your fermentation? Like, what's your yeast level? And like, he got into it, and all the time, by the way, he was behind the counter still making pizzas with a long line at a lunch rush. And I was like, thank you so much. Yeah. And he was apologetic. He said, I wish I had more time. I wish it wasn't so busy. I could have you back there. But, you know, you talk to all these people and they all have the same things of, oh my God, you've got to do this. You've got to do that. I was at breakfast out on vacation and a couple of weeks ago, and one of the guys sitting at the table owned a couple of pizzerias in New Jersey. And we started talking right away. He's like, here's my menu. This is what I'm doing. He's like, I'm not even printing my prices on the menu anymore because the food prices change so frequently. It's variable in the back end. I change it daily. And I was like, I had never thought about that. You know, I never thought about, you know, how do I control that variable that's impacting us all? And like, my first question, how do the customers respond? Because they don't care. They love the pizza and they understand that, hey, look, the food that you buy to make my food changes. And so you have to make some money. And like, you know, people get that. They understand. I think one of the things as a restaurant owner is I'm so sensitive to changing the prices because I'm afraid people are going to freak out and go somewhere else. And the truth is look, there's so many things going on in this world right now that are out of our control. You know, if I don't make these changes, I won't be here to sell you the pizza in the future. And that's the harsh reality.
Yeah, and I think and there's jobs created, right? You're creating jobs, you're creating industry, there's ripple effects, taxes paid, community served. Like the taxes paid thing goes farther than we could ever imagine. I know everyone says, oh, our taxes. But when you really do some of these studies, guys, that I've done to see how when businesses, particularly in food, affect the local economies, particularly if they stay local or local-ish, I mean, their sourcing and their ingredients also, the impact is seriously crazy. The tax dollars, the benefit it does to your community by shopping local is a serious uptake versus when the taxes or the dollars leave and they're taxed somewhere else. I just want everyone to understand that from that point alone, the taxes of the way it bounces in your community for your schools, for your roads, to support the jobs that exist, it's significant. To give the high school the ability to buy uniforms or even interact in the community, like all of that takes tax dollars in the first place, which needs jobs, which needs support in our communities, which means shopping local, pizza, things like that too. I know that's hard because as an entrepreneur, I always juggle this because like it's almost like the rock star. You want to be cool, but if you get too big, you're not cool anymore, syndrome. I don't think that exists quite as much anymore. But as an entrepreneur, we always have to balance that in a growing business, making sure we're tapped into the communities we're in, really, not just saying so and not just swaying with the wind of what's ever popular in the community. Oh, well, it's plant-based today, so we're going to support the community with plant-based. Oh, we're going to do fish Fridays. Okay, we're going to support that in the community today. I get that. But it has to be an overall vision and core value, guys, not just the way the wind blows or whatever opportunity comes your way. Because I think if you listen to what John said, there is an overall thing, and I'm going to anchor that with this, and we're going to continue on, guys, but I just want to anchor something about John's name, John McCormick. Obviously, McCormick, anyone who's been to Chicago, anyone who goes to a grocery store knows the value of the McCormick family and what they've done for the food industry, even though John's not related to them. I just want to emphasize the name value there. Okay. The other part is John. If you look and since I am spiritual, John the Apostle was loyal, loving, and friendship. Okay. The thing he promoted was fellowship and relationships. Interesting. And then the other part that I think is the thing that he is always depicting him is he's a soaring eagle where he was able to be all seeing over his communities. He understood how important the relationships, the interactions were in the communities. And if you want to take it to a God level, how important the relationships with God was to those communities, to him, and to the businesses and environments and industry and economies and freedom of the human soul within that. Okay. But the eagle, it is very similar to the way you look at things, the way you break down, you get things into, you look at very small details, break them into pieces, and then expand them out into a greater good for your business. We talked about data analysis. Data analysis is something so micro, but yet if anyone really does it and understands it, and I love managerial economics. Not many people do, but once you really get it and understand it, it dictates all of your business by studying the data. Big data was a craze. The thing I was most disappointed about the big craze and all the technology and all the data we're collecting is we're still not bringing it into an economic level in our businesses on a smaller level that we should be, that we just talked about. Okay.
Yeah.
As much time as we spend on recipes and social media, we actually should be analyzing the data. And I do agree with every single day, or if you don't have time, weekly, always analyzing your prices and reflecting, and not doing quarterly price updates all the time, plugging into a spreadsheet, into a system, whatever system you have. Our systems, we would just plug in into the recipes, the numbers that we bought it for into the inventory, and it would calculate out to the recipes. But doing that as much as possible and always getting a finger on it. And then as a human, you can start to see the trends, but we need the data, and we need the data in a way that we can use it to put it into a picture form that we can visualize. We have to do the work. It's still at the end of the day, and I'm going to say it, we're only given so much. God, business, customers, vendors are only going to give us so much. We still have to do the rest of the work. We still have to take those steps. And in our businesses, we have to be smart enough to know when we have to do that and stop so much worrying about the inside the business itself. Okay? Let's talk about this conversion, John, as you as a human. This will be my last question. I'm going to ask you to come back on and sign up again, because I have actually 5 more questions that I'm not going to ask that related to the business and menus and all that. But my question is this: the transition for you, lifestyle, for your family, for you as a human, what did that look like as you became an entrepreneur, as you took over someone's business and made it your own?
Yeah, it's been a journey. When I was younger, I thought I was going to be, like I said, Gordon Gekko, or I had this vision of me being a CEO or a C-suite executive. And over the last couple of years, as I transitioned into this role, I've learned that there's so much more value in the time I get to spend with my family versus spending it at the office. When I was working in that tech startup world, it was a day in, day out grind. There was a period of time where I was on the road more than when I was home. I missed kids' birthdays. I missed their special events. I think, early on, you go through phases in your career where you can step on the accelerator and you can pour more of yourself into a role. And there's this time where you have to take your foot off the accelerator, and you have time where you can kind of spend investing in other areas. So there was a period of time where I coached my kids' soccer teams and baseball teams and all of that. But then when I realized, look, I can't teach them anymore, because I've reached the limits of what I can teach them in these areas. So like, you guys go on other teams and you learn from other coaches, and then I'm going to go back to work and go do other things. And, there are trade-offs we always make. And the ability to focus on home now, where I have one daughter who graduated high school last year and she's on to university now. And I have one son who's still in high school. And that time as they are about to leave the house and being able to spend that time here, sure, I'm not making as much money as I used to, but my relationship with my kids are better. The relationship with my wife is better. The relationship with my mom and my in-laws is better. The one thing I continuously hear from people as I've gone through this journey is everybody says, wow, you seem so much happier. You seem so much more relaxed. You seem so much more present than, you have in years past. And that's because, look, I'm an entrepreneur now. Like if I mess up, it's on me. But there's nobody in this world I have more faith in than myself. Right. And there's nobody I trust more when like the chips are down than myself to go do it. And I play a lot of golf, and when we're just messing around, I can be a terrible golfer when there's nothing on the line. But when there's something on the line, when we play in a tournament, usually I play pretty good, and like I get invited to a lot of things because, hey, when the chips are down, I want to bet on myself. Like it's that mentality, and it's kind of what drives me to say, hey, I know I'm good. I'm betting on myself, and I'm not going to let somebody else dictate my self-worth by saying, oh, you're not qualified for that job, or we need somebody with this skill set or whatever. Forget that. I'm taking my own leap of faith on myself because I know it's the safest bet in the world. And, I think a lot of people need to have that mentality. And when I look at entrepreneurs, that's the mentality that I see across the board in entrepreneurs, in that, hey, I'm going to bet on myself because I'm convicted that this is the right path. And I know I have that conviction that I'm going to be successful in this. And if not, then I'm going to make decisions. And, I think one of the character traits of a lot of great entrepreneurs is they make good decisions. They know how to make decisions, which is a skill set of itself. You talk about data and you have all the data in the world, but like, how do you make the decision? And can you live with it? And look, if I make the decision and it's the wrong decision, I have only myself to blame, right? But I'm going to get as much input as I can before I make that decision. But I'm also not going to toil over it, and I'm not going to sit there and say, hey, was it the right decision? It will prove itself over time. And, more often than not, you're going to find you make the right decisions. You'll make some bad decisions, but that's okay. That's actually a data point. And the most I've learned in my life is when I've failed, when I've lost deals, when I've gotten fired from a job. Those are things that I've learned from. And those are the best lessons in life, because that's what drives you as an individual, and that's how you get better. It's not when everything's easy for you. So, that mentality, as you're betting on yourself as an entrepreneur, it'll be okay. It'll be hard. And there's going to be things that don't go your way, and it will happen for a really long time. And, people will tell you things that they think you want to hear. And in the end, you have to have a really good BS filter, and you have to be able to distinguish fact from fiction and opinion. And I think the people who are successful are the ones that can do that really well.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I've seen both. I've seen the successful person who doesn't discern. Discernment's a big deal, guys, and seeking truth as an entrepreneur, as a human. And that's not to seek a person lying or prove that they're lying. It's just to seek the truth that's out there, and then still understand that we're imperfect as humans. There's the love of that, and that's part of being an entrepreneur. But I think truth is very important in business, and being an entrepreneur and having discernment. We've talked about it on a different podcast, but it is what we're talking about here, is the always being honest and straightforward with your employees. I've seen in family businesses and other businesses what that looks like when that doesn't happen. I think that's important for everyone to know, that everything that you do or you allow into your business, or you just like, it can't be that bad. It is bad, because it's just not bad yet. And it's the whole thing we've discussed before, is if you keep ignoring the dragon, like the children's book, eventually the dragon's so big it walks off with the house.
Yeah.
So, part of having data and stuff like that is you can see this stuff, the patterns coming beforehand. Or even better yet, as you become an entrepreneur and you have intuition and you feel energy better, because entrepreneurs, one of the things that really great entrepreneurs are, they operate on energy. One of the things we'll talk about is education, exposure, experience to the world, but then energy. How do we get it? How do we give it to the world? We just talked about Salesforce. Coming into a room, positivity, setting goals, setting destination. It not only puts positive energy into the room, but it also sets that energy in motion towards a destination. Okay, that's important for everyone, and in a way that's positive. And by also involving the business and the community, they're sharing that energy to grow things better. Why do you think Salesforce did so well? Well, it was about growing the world. And Salesforce was a vehicle also to do that, because it made sales and managing a business so much better, honestly. So I think that's the things that we're talking about. John, I'm going to let you close us out and I'm going to just say this for the audience, we're going to talk about John's family being involved in the business more, what that's like going from corporation to creating a family business. Maybe we're going to talk about mentors, things like that in the next episode. We're going to talk about inventory and managing that first in, first out. And we're going to talk about like laws and regulations and how John managed all that, because it's so different in food than say tech. So we're going to talk about that on the next episode. But in the meantime, I'm going to let John speak to you guys with anything that he has sort of in his heart or on his mind that he feels important from our discussion today, that he would want all of you guys to know, that maybe he wish he knew when he was younger as an entrepreneur, as a human, for you guys. So however you want to do it, John, whatever's calling to you, it's yours.
Oh gosh, what a platform. Thank you. I appreciate it. I think, anybody who's out there listening, they're struggling, know that you're not going it alone. It feels like you're going it alone sometimes. You're definitely not. You build up a network of people around you who care about you, who want you to see you successful, that will do favors for you. I find help in the most unlikely of places sometimes. Sometimes it's from customers. Sometimes it's from employees. Sometimes it's from long old friends. Sometimes it's from new friends, people that I barely know. But be open. And the only way to really get ahead and do anything of good in this world is through others. And I think I watch a lot of movies, and one of my favorite movies is Almost Famous. And one of the best lines there is, you're uncool. You're like me. You're uncool, and that's okay. You're only who you really are when you're alone and you're uncool. And know who you are and know where you want to go get stronger, and then build your network of people through that. Go find those people who will make you stronger, because guess what? I'm going to bet you're going to make them stronger too. And I think that's something that a friend of mine, Ralph Barcy, has taught me is motion creates emotion. And so get out there, go be with the people that you want to attract. If you want to go attract, major athletes to represent your brand, go to these events, go talk to people, find your way in, network your way in. There's always a conversation to be had. I've become friends with a lot of professional athletes just for being at the right place at the right time. And the things that they talk to you about, it's amazing. And so, don't ever stop thinking about, how do I overcome this obstacle? You're not alone. People can help you get over that fence. And whatever it is, there's a path forward, and, keep asking for help. That's another thing. Keep asking for help. But yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I'm gonna emphasize something else that we talked about on the show. Pizza Expo. Anyone who's in the pizza business, I get this a lot when I've had pizza entrepreneurs come to me, ask me coaching, consulting advice. The first, or they're going to franchise or whatever, before, like, it's not worth paying anyone $1 of any of those things. Honestly, guys, if you haven't been to Pizza Expo first and got the base education for yourself, no matter how long you've been in the business, I say that to everyone. It's a 100-year-old pizza company that I've talked to a 1-day-old pizza company. It's the most important thing you can do, seeing equipment, packaging, everything you can possibly imagine, trends, there's influencers there, everything that's going on. And why is it so big? Like I said, it is endlessly growing. As long as the population grows, pizza industry is growing, even though it's an old established quote unquote industry by some standards, it is still growing, much like other industries, why there's so much burgers and fried chicken. Also, as long as the population grows, these industries grow. Food, I'm not saying every industry, I'm just saying food, it is something to be consumed. That's my last point for everyone. And I thank everyone for listening in. And the last thing I'm going to anchor, actually, I did say that was the last thing, but I do want to say this. John hasn't gotten to the money he made before yet. And while he's not seeking it, the abundance in his life has more than made up for it. But in that abundance and staying true and building the community and doing the right thing, the business, by the nature of what he's doing and being smart and financially savvy at the same time, which is also doing the right thing, the abundance will be there in the long run. Where it goes, multiple locations, different concepts, acquisitions, who knows, mergers. Maybe he helps businesses make the transition into the next stage of life when people want to exit. Maybe that's John's calling. I don't know. But I do know this. I do know whatever direction it's going, there's a reason we're hearing it right now and we're paying attention to it. And he's got the skills that he has to do what he's doing. So I'm going to leave that with everyone. I love you guys. I appreciate you guys. Where can they find you online, John?
LinkedIn, JD McCormick on LinkedIn, or you can also look me up on Instagram, Pancoast Pizza. We put everything out there at Pancoast_pizza.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I love you guys, and we're out.